are following us. Thank you. We just want to take you briefly, as a thematic group through what we've done in the past, more or less, yes, 1 year, but it's really been like a summary of the last 3 years. Those of you who were here when the sports industry thematic group was still under the Real Sector Policy Commission, we were a little full stop or a comma at the end of the tourism, hospitality, entertainment, creatives thematic group. So we're not even a thematic group of our own. Up to 2017, we recognize some of the stuff here. So our goal, by the time it was January 2018, we became a thematic group. And so our goal was really, and I'm sure a lot of you have probably mastered this goal and can write it yourselves, that we are pushing towards the development of the value chain of sports by monetizing the passion for sports in Nigeria. The minister did mention it, that is the one thing we all have in common. We follow sport regardless of tribe, religion, or any other demographic. So the target for the SITG here is to see how we can generate annual revenues of 2 trillion naira from roughly 60 million consumers from this youth demographic, 15 to 45 years, spending up to 3,000 naira monthly on consuming sports goods and services. So our objectives is a demand supply, that if we create the demand and can supply that demand, we'll get a sports industry, which is really what has been lacking. So in terms of demand, it's more about reforming, restructuring, and repositioning the industry from a public to private sector driven industry, and also increasing the number of people doing sports, so we create that demand. So we want 60 million people to do sport, and if they are doing sport, we want to supply that demand they create for sports goods and services by leveraging our economic weight from the activities such as manufacturing, real estate, sports events, content development and distribution, and sports related services and the media. Then we also want that sports development is a key driver and contributor to the Nigerian economy. So simple economics, demand and supply, you get the industry, which becomes your infrastructure, stadium venues, equipment manufacture, training, kits and merchandise, sponsorship, athletes development, broadcast, tourism, sports medicine, etc. So our strategy is really based on positioning the sports industry as a consumer and demand-driven retail sector. So what that means is that we want to take for example, 100 naira every day from 60 million people. So that is a consumer, thinking of it in terms of consumer demand, right? And hopefully, if we're able to do that, we're looking at contributing between 1.5 and 3% of the GDP of Nigeria within the next 5-10 years. That's looking from 2025 to 2030. So that's the target. We're positioning sports as a game changer by providing a vibrant market for sports goods and services through a grassroots sport development and deployment strategy capable of achieving that GDP within 5-10 years, with the attendant potential of lifting millions of Nigerians out of poverty. So normally in the NESG you have a 1-year goal, but when we put up our work plan this year, we realized we couldn't have a 1-year plan. We had to have a 2-year plan. But at the end of 2 years, we will now have a 5-year plan. So for the first time in the history of the NESG, SITG's work plan is actually a 2-year plan and not a 1-year plan. So and this was brought about by my eminent focal group members when we set up the eminent focal group. Mr. Yaya Maikori, chairman, and his fellow travelers said we could not have Obiasika Moyo Ogusainde, and a host of other people said we couldn't have a 1-year plan. So, and we bought into their wisdom, and here we are. Over the next the 2019-2020, 2 main targets, deliver the national sports industry policy as the bedrock of whatever we're doing. And then we design and implement a framework, a model for attracting and deploying investment and funding for what the industry policy is going to throw up at us. So these were our expected outcomes, that will create a national synergy between the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports, the Federal Ministry of Education, on a unified sporting calendar and grassroots participation, so we actually get that first layer of target market of 40 million children in schools. So we have 40 million children in schools, so we're targeting those 40 million children as the first line of the demand for sports goods and services. So the second outcome was that, and output was that we would encourage the development of a special funding window for the sports industry. Every other industry gets all of those things. How come we don't have it? And so we would work alongside development finance institutions. We will create special hubs and industrial parks for production of sports goods and equipment and the technology required to support sports participation and capacity development. And the third output we expect at the end of 2020 is that we will provide incentives for private sector investment. So the national policy will drive the growth of the industry, and then we develop a clearly defined value chain, and then we now create a basket of incentives to encourage investment into this industry based on that policy. So this is what our work plan looked like by the time it had gone through metamorphosis by the eminent focal group, who, by the way, are the ones supposed to ensure that people like me and you sit inside the room and engage. The main task is to bring stakeholders, reluctant ones particularly, into the room and engage. Secondly, to assist in seeking funding for some of the activities we do. And thirdly, to work on that framework of a special funding window and a model for deploying investment. Those are their three main tasks. So we set out that we needed a technical session with the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports. We also felt we needed a technical session with the Ministry of Education. And then, in line with some of those goals, we felt that there should be one with industries, trade and investment as well, all to be held in August. Then we wanted to develop the sports value chain, do a study on how to develop the sports value chain. And then we knew we would attend the economic summit, because by that time they had told us we were going to have a business roundtable session. And then we hoped that we would have a policy dialogue by February next year, and would also have what we were calling funding and investment engagements and summits between May and July. And we figured that it would cost us about 150 million to do all of these things. We're still looking for that money. So in their wisdom, they felt we needed to make a case for business leaders in the sports sector like you all. The key goal of looking for these business leaders was that it would lead to a private sector development of the industry shaped by a vibrant policy. It will enable us to successfully implement whatever framework or model we come up with, because it will be driven by committed, business-oriented individuals and organizations able to combine industry targets with social engagement goals. Because sports is funny. You are trying to use a business model to deal with what is essentially a social function. But if other countries have done it, I see no reason why we can't do it. So our work plan objective now became that we will promote an aggregation of these business leaders to serve as a key driver of the implementation of the work of this reform and positioning of the agenda. So our 2019 report, here we have finished saying what we're going to do. So let's now see whether we did it. So we set up these work groups. The SITG sits, like that 150 plus, we're now 200. Believe it or don't believe what people you are seeing here. We're actually about 220 plus, scattered all over the world. So that you are few today is simply because this meeting moved from Friday to Tuesday, and so many things. As at this morning, I'm still receiving apologies, but it's okay. They're following online. So the SITGC is banged in the middle there, and through the work, through the NESG's permission people, we were able to set up the eminent focal group as well as 7 subgroups. I'm glad to see here that the leadership of some of the subgroups present here, Mr. Chijoko Koli, our learned SAN, led the legislation and dispute resolution subgroup, and Amaka, another learned, all the learneds are taking over this place. So another learned another lawyer, Amaka Agbakobo, led the Sports for Peace and Social Development. And this subgroup submitted their reports to a Harmonization and Validation Committee. One of the members is here, Dejamoto Imbo, was a member of that Harmonization and Validation Committee. Because it's one thing to do your work, it's another thing for it to now be validated by another set of people. And that report is ready and is going to form part of the policy dialogue. Now, the eminent focal group on their own part set up a feasibility team. We had already identified that the issues from the report here, some of the issues were an infrastructure gap, that we cannot just, if we have 40 million children today that enter demand sports goods and services, and we insist that they must play sport, there is nowhere for them to play. So there's a feasibility team that was set up studying how to deploy infrastructure in such a way as to minimize that gap. The feasibility report will be ready at the end of this month. And I'm pleased to say you need to see some of the work done by a member of the eminent focal group, architect Moyo Gusende, who's put models of what the kind of structure you should see in community cluster facilities. We have 3 models that we're looking at, and the remaining members of the team are actually looking at the business case for deploying those. Then there was a value chain development study team led by Professor Sadiq Abdullahi, who we have actually applied, and we are waiting for a grant to complete the value chain development study from TED Fund, and hopefully by January we'll get a feedback from them. And there is also a funding and investment strategy and framework led by Mr. Yaya Maikori himself, who's working on the best way to attract what platform, what pipeline, what's the best way to attract the kind of funding you need, and where is it best to deploy that kind of funding, particularly as we want it to be private sector led. So with these work groups in place, as I said, you can see some of the subgroups and their leads. We had sports, media and entertainment, policy formulation, the environment and tourism, funding and investment, sports for peace, youth and social development, legislation and dispute resolution. And these are the members of the eminent focal group. These are their terms of reference. And I can tell you they've been sticking to their time. In fact, they've been really sticking to their terms of reference. We work like, the main team works like all the hours that God sends just to provide the information that they need. And this is the Harmonization and Validation Committee. They've finished collating and harmonized the work plans, and that report was submitted October 2019 and is forming the basis of the concept note and terms of reference for the interministerial technical session. So this is the infrastructure feasibility study team.